So Growlanser 3 actually takes place before 1 and 2 does, 1,000 years later. That's the mistake I made. And Growlanser 3 is in fact in English. So you might want to play Growlanser 3 before you play 1 and 2. The story goes, there's a character that loses his memory, doesn't remember where he's at, and there's a bunch of people that are like by his side trying to hopefully like regain his conscience. But as time goes on, you know, eventually he finds out that everything the life that they knew of was essentially be under attack by these dark forces. And then as time went on, eventually they found out there was actually much more to the whole story. You know, you meet like this assassin named Randolph, you meet this, but eventually, you know, it just ends up becoming like all these dilemmas eventually become part of something much bigger. The main character, Slain, well, with his memory wiped still because he's got amnesia. Kind of think of it like Shadow the Hedgehog, where like, you know, at the beginning of the game, you know, before the game even begins, you know, you know, he forgets who he is, and he goes on a quest like with the multiple paths and all that you can take, playing all the games out of order, all the levels and all that. So it's actually really interesting. So they take the same approach with they talk about how like there's this woman that follows Slain around, you know, who kind of likes him, really kind of has a crush on him and all that. And as time goes on, she eventually finds out even her family's not safe anymore, because like as soon as like Growlanser 3 starts, literally the game opens up, like, you know, it gives like this little prologue, and then all of a sudden the game starts off with like you just starting in the middle of a battle, like outside the village, like it's like in the village while this is going on. It's actually really, it just cuts to the, it kind of does like what Final Fantasy II does on the PSP, where like, you know, the Emperor just strikes the village. It doesn't really begin until after that. It's actually really interesting. But then after it, you know, you just lose conscious, and you know, you wake up, and eventually you figure out like there's like a bunch of story that happens, kind of explaining like what had happened, and like, you know, you have to like, they're trying to get you and the daughter out of there because you know, because like there's a mysterious assassination group going big at the group, but it's part of something much bigger apparently. Again, dark ritual comes into play later on. So what ends up happening is, you know, you end up finding out that the character, that your main character is actually, you know, why he forgot who he was because he was also an assassin from another point in time. And again, much kind of like, you know, like the other first two games, you know, the game uses what is known as the space-time, you know, because again, there's a lot of parallel universes. Again, think of it like Summon Night, where like, you know, there's like all these different worlds and are connected into one. They're like parallel universes, but like once somebody found like a way to bisect the worlds, you had like people from like other dimensions interacting with this. So like, so in Growlancer's case, there was what is known as the Growians, the Grotians, the Featherins, and then there was like all these other races too, and eventually like they'd have like time traveling. You'd eventually meet this guy by the name of Xion, or it's Z-I-O-N. It's, I always forget how to pronounce that. It's like Zishin or something like that. Zishan, or something like that. You know, so you know, you find out that, you know, he's just a mysterious character. He's not from the same time period, but eventually you find out who he really is, and over time you have to stop him. Like something about like he has to collect like 50,000 souls, and somewhere down the line you have to stop him from completing this dark ritual. There's a bunch of other people that are like supporting him too, like Cybele and Cybele. Sibel, whatever his name is, and so eventually you have to stop these guys by either killing them or just prohibiting their access to the ritual, because essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to use what is known as the invisibility. It's not incivility, it's invisibility gem. If you're not familiar with the way Growlanser works, there's what is known as there's a lot of terms in the game that the game throws at you. Again, reading the story might actually help too. But thankfully, Growlanser Realm states that there's what is known as Growshu, which is the magic that essentially the mana that people use to, unless you were a Groshan, you really couldn't use like really powerful magic. Like some people could learn like minimal magic, but like they couldn't use like the top tier magic and all that. It's really interesting. But as far as Growlanser 3 goes, there's a lot of different races, a lot of different characters that like just kind of like they're going on in their own way, because there's like different countrysides, people from like other dimensions. But as far as once the main character essentially gets his memory back, essentially they try to stop Sibel and Zishan. I don't know, like how I believe Zishan is the final boss, and he has like right around 4,000, 5,000 HP. It's been a while, but it's really interesting though. So once you kill them, essentially they drop the active like what the whole ritual was, because they need the invisibility gem to like so you don't know they're there. But then eventually they could turn it into like the incivility gem, because like it's or essentially they become like dark deities. Like it's essentially like the dark magic that was brewing right around the time before Gavis and all that from the original world came into play, and Gavel, which would we later see in Growlanser 1, and then Gavis in Growlanser 2. But they might have been from the same time period, rather, because like the same, different world transportations, but like they still exist in that playing field, though. That's usually how it goes right around the bat. But essentially the idea is that, the way Growlanser 4 works is, or 3, it essentially allows you to, it kind of returns back to the original time period where like you could travel between the towns. You still have like you could get many characters in the games. The game's only on the PS2 from what I understand. It was Japanese, English. There's no remakes as far as I'm aware. They call it the Darkness Duel, but it can just be interpreted as the Duel of Darkness. Essentially like another way of looking at it. Another way you could really look at it and word it is that essentially what ends up happening is, aside from the main characters trying to stop the bad guys and uncover like this dark history, it's essentially like these dark arts are essentially connected. But to kind of give it to you in a nutshell, kind of like more of the story, essentially like one of the biggest things that the main character hails from like a unknown universe, or rather, different time period, doesn't remember who he is. Again, it's revealed who it is later. And he has something to do with the sun dying and all these villains gathering, because the land seems to be dying and people are trying to take it for themselves. So they're trying to fight back and try to solve this dark dilemma. But as the continent of Krishlin, the people try to find a way to save themselves, rather. People are starving to death. Wars are breaking out. Scarce food and resources. Kingdom, nothing was really essentially stable, rather. Again, getting this off GrowlancerRealm.com. And then Annette was the woman that rescued Slain, which is the woman Annette Burns, as he decides to venture out into the world. They find out that the sun spirits are connected to are dying out to the dark power. Slain seems to have dark powers. Slain's identity has something to do with the dying land. But what does it also have to do with the villains gathering? Killing massive amounts of people. Again, connected to the dark ritual, which is very... It's essentially connected, rather. Just to name off a bunch of characters that you find in the game, you have Slain, Annette, Hugh, Monica, Remy, Yamoi, Michelle, Victor, Vincent, Orfas, Vincent, yeah, Barba, Clive, Sheen, Gilhart, Granford, Kenneth, Gray, Randolph, Alfred, Annette's mother, who we never really get a name from her, Belford, and James Wellington. Renault, Marshall, Augusta, Carl, Granford, Linnaeus, Granford again, Remington, Tony, Rutger, and Peter and Rumika, which is Monica's mother, because she's half Featherian and human, which is actually interesting, because it deals with a lot of racism and segregation too. Hey, there's a lot of plot twists with these games, if you haven't already noticed, rather. Something else worth noting, and ever since Growlanser 2 and 3 took place, you can actually charge like certain spells and all that, so you can like cast them multiple times on people, and even though it will still use the same amount of MP consumption, but it's actually worth noting that, depending on like how you play the game, there's multiple ways to play the game. So ever since Growlanser 1, there was many spells that were introduced, and a lot of spells that were later introduced as well, and there was a lot of upgrades to them as well. Growlanser 3 does this a lot, actually. So despite it being the first game in the series, it's also, in the timeline from the first 3 games perspective, because I don't know where 4, 5, and 6 take place, so as I'm recording this right now. I will make a timeline explaining this, though. So, essentially, as of right now, you want to play 3 before you play 1 and 2, as of right now.
I'm certainly doing much better than this godforsaken land. Look, see how the desolation approaches? I remember growing vegetables on this very spot when I was little. I don't remember when it started. But when the sun's power began to weaken, this world began dying. Still, I have no right to complain. We are far better off than neighboring kingdoms. Of course, they now seek to escape certain death by encroaching on what little good fortune we've been afforded. But even you know that much. Even in the 2 months' time you've been with us, you can see what we're up against. Leave the post to me and go get some rest while you can. The days are coming when there will be rest for no one.
It's time to change shifts.
I'm here to relieve you.
What in the world are you looking at? Was Renault just here? No, he couldn't have been. He's... We didn't want you to know, but Renault died. He was concerned with your survival until his dying breath. I'm sorry to even tell you this. I know how much guilt you must feel about what he did for you. We should go now. Let's return home.